Imagine drifting silently in the vast emptiness of space. No air, no sound, just darkness stretching endlessly in every direction. Now, imagine someone pulls a trigger. Would the bullet travel forever? Could it hit something millions of kilometers away? And perhaps the strangest question of all, would you even hear it? Today, we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating physics questions you've probably never fully explored. What actually happens if a gun is fired in space? Before we begin, if you're curious about the universe and want to explore more mind-bending space questions like this, make sure to subscribe to Give Me Space, where we break down everything you need to know about the cosmos, one mystery at a time. Let's start with the most basic question. Would a gun even work in space? Surprisingly, yes, a gun can fire in space. And here's why. Inside a bullet cartridge is something called gunpowder, a chemical mixture that contains both fuel and its own oxidizer. That's important because fire on Earth usually needs oxygen from the air. But gunpowder, it doesn't rely on outside oxygen. When the trigger is pulled, a firing pin strikes the primer, igniting the gunpowder, which rapidly expands into gas, and that explosion pushes the bullet forward out of the barrel. All of that happens entirely inside the cartridge. So, even in the vacuum of space, with no air at all, the gun will still fire. Space is a vacuum. That means no air resistance. On Earth, when you fire a gun, air slows the bullet down almost immediately. Friction, drag, turbulence, all work against it. But in space, there's nothing to slow it down. So once the bullet is fired, it just keeps going, and going, and going. In theory, forever, unless it hits something. That's one of the most incredible differences between Earth and space. A bullet fired on Earth travels maybe a few kilometers before stopping, but in space, it could travel for millions, even billions of kilometers. Now here's where things get eerie. Would you hear the gunshot? The answer is sound needs a medium to travel through, like air, water, or solid material. But space has none of that. So even though the gun fires, even though there's an explosion, there is complete silence. If you were standing nearby, without a helmet, you wouldn't hear a thing. Of course, you also wouldn't survive very long. But inside a spacesuit, you might feel vibrations, but you still wouldn't hear the sound traveling through space. It's one of the strangest aspects of the universe. Explosions can happen without any sound at all. Once the bullet leaves the barrel, its journey becomes something entirely different from what we experience on Earth. First, it keeps its velocity. No air resistance means no slowing down. Second, it follows Newton's first law of motion. Objects in motion stay in motion unless acted upon by an external force. In space, those forces are limited. Gravity from planets, stars, or other objects might alter its path, but otherwise, it just keeps going.
Over time, it could drift through space indefinitely. Imagine a bullet fired today, still traveling long after Earth is gone. That tiny piece of metal becoming a permanent traveler of the cosmos. Now, here's the big question. Could that bullet actually hit anything? Technically, yes. Realistically, it's incredibly unlikely. Space is unimaginably vast. Even entire galaxies are mostly empty.
So the chances of a single bullet hitting a planet, asteroid, or spacecraft are almost zero. But not impossible. And if it did hit something, at high speed, even a small object can cause serious damage. This is actually a real concern in space exploration.
Tiny debris, moving at high velocity, can puncture spacecraft. So a bullet traveling through space would essentially become dangerous space debris. Now, let's talk about something really interesting: recoil. On Earth, when you fire a gun, you feel a backward kick. That's because of Newton's third law. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction.
In space, this effect becomes much more noticeable. If an astronaut fired a gun, they wouldn't just feel a kick, they would actually be pushed backward, floating, drifting in the opposite direction of the bullet. And without anything to stop them, they would keep moving. In fact, this is similar to how rockets work. Instead of bullets, they expel gas at high speed, and the reaction force pushes the rocket forward. Space is also incredibly extreme in terms of temperature. In direct sunlight, it can be extremely hot. In shadow, it can be freezing cold. So what happens to a gun? Metal can become brittle in extreme cold and expand in heat. Lubricants inside the gun could freeze or evaporate. Over time, this might cause the gun to malfunction. But for a single shot, it would likely still work. So what happens if a gun is fired in space? The gun works. The bullet fires. There's no sound, no air resistance, and the bullet could travel forever. It's a perfect example of how different the universe is once you leave Earth behind. Simple actions become completely alien, and something as ordinary as pulling a trigger turns into a journey across the cosmos. If you enjoyed this, make sure to like and subscribe to Give Me Space. And in the next video, we'll explore a question that's even more mind-bending. What would actually happen if you fell into a black hole? Trust me, you won't want to miss that.